Hello?
Hello?
Yes?
Who is this?
Why do you want to know my name?
I want to know who I'm looking at.
In 1996, the horror film Scream was released. It was unique, a commentary on horror movies of the past whilst also being a horror movie itself. The movie was directed by one of cinema's great horror directors, Wes Craven. But what is a horror movie? Is it something like this? Or is it something like this?
What's in the box? What's in the fucking box? Give me the gun.
Well, the Webster definition of a horror movie is this. So, I guess anything could be deemed as a horror movie, depending on an individual's propensity for the subject matter. In this video, we're going to list the 10 scariest movies ever made, which may or may not fall into the horror genre. Not the best, nor the worst, nor any of those hilarious low-budget movies from the 80s. And this is a warning, this video will contain spoilers. So, let's do this, starting with number 10.
Checkmate.
The thing about a scary film is that they should, even if it's in the smallest way, connect you to reality, something that is tangible. So it's slightly strange that this film and the next are on this list. The Thing is maybe director John Carpenter's masterpiece. This remake of the 1951 film, The Thing from Another World, had no right to be as good as it is. It went through several writers and directors before coming to screen. Now, why is this film about a literal thing so scary? Well, there's two things that this film plays on that humans don't like: isolation and trust. And this film plays into both themes expertly. From the remote setting of the Antarctica to the fact that the true enemy in this film could be your friends in arms. The film keeps you in a loop of perpetual distrust with no way out, and the score from legendary Italian composer Ennio Morricone is breathtaking. If you've not seen The Thing, it's about time you did.
She's dead. Anybody ever tell you look dead, man?
One of the most famous scenes in the Alien franchise is this.
Get away from her, you bitch!
And that is from the film Aliens, which was directed by James Cameron. The film strays more into action than horror, but the 1979 classic Alien is pure horror. The film is what would happen if Stanley Kubrick's Space Odyssey 2001 had a baby with Steven Spielberg's Jaws. This scene was once considered one of the scariest in film history. And what this film gets perfectly right is exactly what Jaws got perfectly right. Fear comes from your own imagination. Nothing can beat that. So show less and achieve more. The alien in this film has a total of 3.5 minutes screen time in a film that lasts 116 minutes. If you think about that, that is insane. Our fear comes from within, not from the alien that we see or don't see. Ridley Scott, who's always been a master of composition, frames his scenes beautifully and turns Sigourney Weaver from former model into a movie star overnight. It was perhaps the biggest shift in movie history for women action characters. And whilst the film is easily one of the best sci-fi horrors ever made, it also set the template for all the sequels which have followed so lazily. For me, the Alien franchise began with Scott's Alien and ended with Cameron's Aliens. The others simply don't exist. For 8, we go to the only traditional horror film on the list, Saw. This extremely low-budget movie does what it says on the tin. And it must be commended because without this film, the model that Blumhouse has been making a killing from wouldn't have existed. Saw is a low-budget movie that looks better than low budget. It's shot well, has one big star, and a really cool horror premise. A sadistic man goes around punishing people for what he perceives as their sins, putting them into tricky, no-win situations. It plays into the idea of torture porn, creating truly gory moments. Now, there are many torture porn horror films out there, one of which uses a similar premise but is more streamlined, and that is the Korean film I Saw the Devil, where a man captures and releases a serial killer over and over again for 2 hours non-stop. For me, a film like this is quite repetitive. The beauty of Saw is simple. We are presented with two characters who are trapped in a room, chained and bound, with a saw between them. The only way out, it would seem, would be to use the saw itself. And yup, it doesn't work on the chain, so you'll need to saw something else to get free. The fact that there's two strangers who don't know each other just makes things even more intriguing. Again, we play into the idea of isolation and trust. And much like the Alien franchise, this film set a template which was to be followed by numerous sequels and prequels. To date, there have been 10, ranging from awful to interesting to Chris Rock. And Chris Rock is slated to be directing a remake of the brilliant Danish film Another Round.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Now that joke may not age well if the film's actually great, but we're gonna go with the joke anyway. Now, sitting at 7 is actually the film Seven. That was not planned, believe me. I just found out now whilst reading my script. I'm sorry. It's corny, I know, but let's just go with that as well. Seven was the moment that took Morgan Freeman, Brad Pitt, and this guy into true cult status. It also heavily links to our 9th movie on the list, which is Alien. You see, prior to this film, director David Fincher was a mere superstar music director. And when he got his chance to direct Alien 3, he snatched at it. But allegedly, the studio destroyed the film, making Fincher want to quit directing films until this script came along and he could not resist. Seven is what you get if you throw away the playbook of filmmaking and just go with the flow. I mean, think about it. What city does this film take place in? Why is it always raining? How are these two cops not even anywhere close to finding a guy who's killing so rapidly in such a small city? And our serial killer actually is right in front of Detective Mills and Somerset early in the film as a press photographer. All of these things are not very believable, but they're also almost irrelevant because Fincher sells us this dream so perfectly, keeping us in the dark but also giving us enough light to see. And much like Alien, we hardly see the true face of evil for many minutes in the film, with this guy putting in a top 5 best villains ever performance. We never see him doing any killing, only the aftermath, and the ending leaves us with a moral conundrum as horrific as the film itself. Again, keeping us as not merely passengers, but thoroughly in the driver's seat of the journey. Seven marked the birth of truly one of the great American directors, and certainly was highly influential for all thrillers going forward, especially a film that maybe surpassed it in memories of murder.
You, me, and the baby. Together.
6. The Fly. David Cronenberg was the horror king of the 80s. His body horror movies were punishing to watch, leaving nothing to the imagination. This remake of the 1958 film of the same name draws you in using the charm and wit of Jeff Goldblum, and then slowly starts to spit you out by slowly turning our protagonist into an antagonist, firmly placing us in the shoes of both Seth, played by Goldblum, and then Veronica, played by the brilliant Gina Davies. Every crack of a bone, every fingernail removal feels so visceral. This is David Cronenberg's best film, and of all the films on this list, the most shock-inducing from a sound and visual standpoint. Be warned, this film is not for the faint-hearted.
Yeah, boy. I bet you can squeal. I bet you can squeal like a pig. Oh.
Yep, you've probably heard that line before, and that's where it comes from. This 1972 John Borman film is as visceral as it gets. And whilst the film may not have dated well with the stereotypes of Americans from the Deep South, it remains a scary look into what happens when cultures clash. One of the great actors of the past 50 years is the underrated Jon Voight, dad of Angelina Jolie. I'm sure you can see the resemblance. And if you only know Burt Reynolds from this,
More like the day after tomorrow.
then you don't know he was one of the massive A-listers in Hollywood back in the 70s and the early 80s. This film sees them both, along with wonderful character actor Ned Beatty,
And you have meddled with the primal forces of nature.
as friends who go to the outbacks of Georgia to seek some fun and adventure for a few days. But soon they are the targets of the locals, who are sadistic and very unwelcoming to their non-local ways, leading to abuse of the highest order and murder. Much like The Thing, Saw, and Alien, that sense of isolation and not being able to escape is what comes into play here. Film was nominated for so many Oscars and won nothing, but you can see why, right?
Deliverance, Warner Brothers, produced by John Borman. The Immigrants, a Svensk film industry production, Warner Brothers. The Godfather, an Albert S. Ruddy production, Paramount, Albert S. Ruddy producer. And the winner is Albert S. Ruddy, Godfather.
20 Minuten. Dass ihr in, sagen wir mal, 12 Stunden alle 3 kaputt seid, okay?
Now, question for you. Do you dare me to make a list like this and not include the masterworks of Michael Haneke? Yes, I know he appeared on my last list about the 10 movies to watch before you die, but it's well warranted because the film Funny Games is about as horrific as a horror film can be without being a horror film. When Haneke made Funny Games, he was hardly known. He was 55. His only archival film before that was Benny's Video, made when he was 50. So it's fair to say that he was a late bloomer in the industry. Prior to that, he worked in television and was a film critic, and in 2002 he became a university teacher. And all of this makes sense when you see his works. He removes all the artifice from film that sometimes seeps in, providing you with a gritty, almost realistic tone. It hits you square in the face with unflinching sucker punches. He doesn't use music nor quick cuts, and doesn't cheapen his films with melodrama. Haneke attempts to show you real life on screen, and 1997's Funny Games is no different. But at times, it is slightly different. The violence, and again, the sadism, leans heavily into horror, and the horror of young people doing unimaginable things for no logical reason. The thing that really makes you fear his work is that no one is spared the cruelty, not even children, in a scene that is almost unwatchable. If you've seen the remake and not the original, you've done yourself quite the disservice, because the original is where the magic happens. If you want to get into Haneke's work and don't know where to start, this film is perfect. It lets you in just enough to push you right back out again. Genius film, genius filmmaker.
あなたはもう動けない。体は死ぬけど、神経だけは起こしておいてあげます。
Now, I had a video on my channel all about a scene from Audition, which to date is the scariest scene I've seen committed to film. YouTube took it down and copyright struck me, my first. So, I'll be setting up a Patreon soon so that I can publish that video and other videos like that I can't put on YouTube. I would love you, when it's live, to be a member. 1999 was an incredible year for me. Many, like me, would argue it was the best year for films ever. This film is one of the many gems that came out in an incredible year. The Miike Takashi film truly delves squarely into torture horror, making you feel a slight sense of empathy for the antagonist until she breaks our trust completely. Prior to this film, I thought no horror film was truly scary. This film changed my mind, and the scene in question is relentless, making the character of Asami truly one of the most terrifying villains ever put on film. This Japanese film sits firmly at number 3 on this list. Number 2 is a Dutch film. Now, that's a weird term, Dutch film. How many Dutch films can you name? The Dutch aren't notorious for their filmmaking, but this 1998 film is truly a standout. Dutch couple Rex and Saskia are holidaying in France. Saskia goes missing, and Rex spends most of his life trying to work out who took her. And who took her? Well, this man. But we actually find this out almost immediately into the film. It's no big surprise. What does come as a surprise to us is just how the material is handled. Because this man has a family, a wife, kids. He has a beautiful house in France and a job. He's a normal man. He laughs and jokes with his family. His kids love him. And he's acutely aware of the fact that he's a sociopath. The film spends much of the second act normalizing him. And it changed the way that villains were written in films after that. Many of your favorite directors and writers cite this film as hugely inspirational. Even Kubrick thought it was the most chilling film he'd seen. The thing that makes this film so incredibly scary is that by normalizing the killer, it makes all the events feel more real. And again, back to the idea of truth. Who can we trust? Who can we truly trust? This film is incredible, and there was even a lame remake in English language by the same director in 1993, starring Jeff Bridges and Keith Sutherland. And of course, like most Hollywood remakes, it crashed and burned. Will they never learn?
Does anybody know how to spell troglodytes? For the telegram.
So, sitting at number 1 is Bone Tomahawk by director, writer S. Craig Zahler. Meaning that at number 10 and at number 1, we have Kurt Russell movies. Now again, this was not planned at all. I did not put Kurt Russell at 10 on purpose and number 1 on purpose. That was absolute fluke. I kind of only found that out as I was writing the script. It's not relevant. Let's go back to the video. But the thing is, the two films couldn't be any different if they tried. This Western cum horror is one of the most unique films ever. Firstly, not many films can attest to being a Western horror film, nor can they boast such an incredible cast of character actors. Patrick Wilson, Matthew Fox, Richard Jenkins, Sean Young, Fred Melamed. Now, if you go into this film knowing nothing, which is kind of how I want you to approach it, you'll probably wonder why this film is so scary. So if you've not seen the film, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, watch the film, and then come back later and finish the video. If you've seen it, keep watching because you'll know, just as I do, this film takes you to such unexpected and unimaginable places. The inbred cannibals that are introduced into this film are ice cold. The sound that they make stays with you long after the credits roll. And the fact that they do not bargain, do not speak, and they treat humans like mere cattle is just so clinical and disturbing. The exciting director also made Brawl in Cell Block 99 and Dragged Across Concrete. Both wonderful films, but this is a standout classic. Zahler's voice is one that truly stands out amongst the industry where there is a serious lack of unique creators. If you're looking to be scared, today, get this film on. Now, I've never been the hugest fan of horror films. I often find horror films quite hilarious, to be honest with you, which is why you know that any film on this list is truly going to be scary. Horror films are extremely popular amongst film fans and casual film goers. Now, the reason for that is because they take you on a roller coaster of emotions. The film The Shining is considered to be one of the most scary films of all times. It's not on my list, but you know what? If you watch here, you can see a video all about how its director Stanley Kubrick made The Dark Knight. And until we speak again, big love.